Legacy Motor Club has filed a lawsuit against TJ Puchyr, and the chances of going back to Chicagoland in 2026 are increasing. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brendan Poole's 2025 Clark CW Sun scheme that we'll see this weekend at Dober. Honestly, car looks solid. I like the colors of it overall. Alpha Prime Racing generally does a really good job with their paint schemes. It does look good. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Dober. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Preece's 2025 Alyssa Thomas Castrol scheme that we'll see this weekend at Dober. Car looks okay in my opinion. I love the sponsorship. I think with like Gamebridge or something like that, it does look solid and it does look alright. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Truex's 2025 New Jersey State Police scheme that we'll see this weekend at Dover. I really like the look of this car. I like the blue they've got on there. I like the yellow on it. I like a lot of things about it. It does look solid. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Berry's 2025 Advanced Auto Parts scheme that we'll see this weekend at Dover. Honestly, this car actually looks solid. It looks kind of very similar to the Ryan Blaney one we've seen the last couple of years. It does look fine. I like the colors of it overall in this one. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Anthony Alfredo's 2025 Lanita scheme that we'll see this weekend at Dover. Good to see Anthony Alfredo have a new sponsor. Not the biggest fan of this paint scheme, to be honest, but it's pretty cool that he has got a new sponsor for this weekend at Dover. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2025 SELA scheme that we'll see, I believe, for a couple races in 2025. Cool to see him have a new sponsor for this weekend, I believe, in a couple other races as well. And pretty excited to see if SELA will step up and sponsor Ryan Ellis in 2025. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jeb Burton's 2025 Fast Track scheme that we'll see this weekend at Dover. I like the look of this car. I do like some of the things about it, and it's nice to see that Jeb Burton does have a new sponsor for this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Bilicki's 2025 Mando scheme that we'll see next weekend at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Car looks okay in my opinion. Not the biggest fan of some of the colors on it, but I do think it's nice that a new sponsor's coming in and working with Josh Bilicki in 2025. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Harrison Burton's 2025 Morton Building scheme that we'll see this weekend at Dover. Pretty nice to see a new sponsor for him, even though he's had association with them because they're part of the Kevin Harvick Corporated brand. I actually like the look of this car. It's nice to see they have a different look to some of the cars they have, and it's good to see this car will be out on the racetrack at Dover. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Denny Hamlin's 2025 Bob's Discount Furniture scheme that we'll see this weekend, or not this weekend, a couple weeks from now at Iowa Speedway. I really like this. Well, I'm not the biggest fan of this car personally. I do think it's nice that Denny Hamlin has picked up the Bob's Discount Furniture car, but I'm going to be real and honest, this is one of my least favorite Joe Gibbs Racing team schemes in quite some time. The cars just don't work for this car for me. I think you got like an orange number or like a green number. You've got like an orange background on it. I'm not the biggest fan of this one. It don't look that good. I think they kind of dropped the ball on this one personally. It's one of my least favorite paint schemes I've seen so far from Joe Gibbs Racing this year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Dover purse money for this weekend. So every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockrass puts out the purse money for the event. And according to Bob for the Cup race, it's $11,055,250. And for the Xfinity race, it's $1,651,939. Cup Series always gets more money, and that might increase with it being known that 24 and front are going to be open teams. That money's kind of similar to what they've been getting all year. Xfinity kind of similar as well. I'd like to see that number increase, though, for the Xfinity Series in the future. Maybe like go up to $2 to $2.5 million, considering the Xfinity Series is getting some pretty good ratings at this particular moment in point. But I gotta say, it's nice to see that they have some decent ratings for the Xfinity Series race, but I wish it was definitely higher for the Xfinity Series race, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the A-post flap. As reported by Bob Pockrass yesterday, that NASCAR has added a new A-post flap to keep cars on the ground that will debut at Daytona in about a month from now. This is interesting. Of course, NASCAR is trying to prevent cars from flipping upside down. We've had a lot of issues with these next-gen cars with the underbodies and the underside of the car, causing these cars to flip more consistently, not just at tracks like Daytona, Talladega, but we've even seen it at tracks like Michigan at least once or twice before. I'm not sure if this is going to help, to be honest. I don't know if we'll see. Maybe it will help. I don't know. Maybe this will kind of help the reduction of or increase the speed it needs to have. So there's like a certain takeoff speed that can take place here. It's an interesting move to me. I like they're trying to prevent cars from flipping upside down, but at the same time, I'm not sure if it's fully going to help. I could be wrong. I'm not an aerodynamist, so I'm not sure if it's going to help or not. We'll have to kind of wait and see on that front. Nonetheless, it's interesting that NASCAR has finally gone ahead and added a new A-post flap. We'll keep an update on that, and we'll see if we do have any flips, but I'm not sure if we will, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, Kyle Busch, of course, throughout this year has been competing in a bunch of Legends Cars races at Charlotte during the Cookout Shootout that's been taking place at Charlotte Motor Speedway with the Legends Cars. And once again, a couple of nights ago, I believe it was on Tuesday or Wednesday, Kyle Busch was able to win a Legends Car race at the track of Charlotte. I think Kyle Busch has won 5 or 6 races so far in 2025, which is going to make a lot of Kyle Busch fans happy. I think it's big, though, because for Kyle Busch going out there winning races, it gives you confidence throughout the remainder of the year. And I think this could help Kyle Busch, considering Kyle Busch is 37 points below the cutoff line currently at the moment. I do think there's a chance that could potentially change, considering we have seen a lot of drivers that have been below the cutoff line many times before that have found their way to be able to win. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see if he can go out there and maybe get a win in NASCAR with this. Maybe this can provide some momentum. We'll see, but nonetheless, pretty cool that Kyle Busch was able to pick up a Legends Car win. I think that's great, and it's good to see, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Access. Now, there was a report that came out from Adam Stern, I believe on Tuesday, that Steve Phelps kind of talked about Access in NASCAR and talked about Formula 1 and IndyCar as well. And Steve Phelps thinks that NASCAR doesn't compete with Formula 1 and IndyCar. He says there's about a 6% crossover with Formula 1, and there's about a 20 to 25% crossover with IndyCar as well. And he says that when it comes to Access, NASCAR has the best access of all 3 series. Now, I'm going to be real honest here. I don't think that's entirely true. Yes, I do agree that NASCAR does have way more access than Formula 1. I think that is completely accurate. Where I don't think is accurate is the compensation of IndyCar. From what I know and understand, IndyCar has a lot more opportunities for access than you have with NASCAR. NASCAR, you have to pay a lot more money to get on pit road, for example, than in IndyCar. And you also can't access a garage in NASCAR easily. You have to buy a bunch of different passes. It costs a lot of money to get access to the garage. IndyCar, from my understanding, does have a cheaper route to get there. And also, I would say that you have the IMSA series, a series that NASCAR owns. Access is very easy to get on. You can pay $45 to get garage passes and pit passes as well. You pay a lot less money to do that kind of stuff. So I do think, yes, that NASCAR does have more opportunities for access than Formula 1. I don't agree that they have more access than IndyCar. IndyCar, I think, has a better access route, even though I think the racing is better in NASCAR than IndyCar right now. I think when it comes to access, I think IndyCar is beating NASCAR on that front. Some may disagree with me on that, but I think that's how it is. I just think how that's kind of is currently at the moment, and I think that's absolutely accurate that NASCAR doesn't have as much access as IndyCar at this moment. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jensen Button. As it was reported, I believe, by one of the outlets for IMSA and sports cars as well, that it's reported that Jensen Button is expected to leave Jota Sport at the end of 2025, as Jensen Button is expected to start scaling back his racing career at the age of 45 years old. This does not shock me and surprise me. Jensen Button has been racing for a very, very long time. We all go back to when he started racing Formula 1 in the early 2000s. And, of course, he's been competing in the World Endurance Championship and doing some other stuff over the course of the last couple years as well. I think that Jensen Button has had an amazing career. Of course, a Formula 1 champion in, I believe, 2006 or 2007 or something like that. And Jensen Button's won a lot of races in his racing career as well. I really hope he can end this season on a great note because Jota Sport has had a really, really strong and great season. Of course, one of the companies that sponsor him, Hertz, will sponsor John Hunter Nemechek this weekend in the NASCAR Cup Series race at Dober. I think it's pretty interesting that Jensen wants to end his career at Jota. I'd have to think maybe down the road he comes in and races NASCAR again. He did make a couple starts back in 2023. 2023. Did have some okay success when it comes to qualifying among other things, but didn't have the races go as well as I think he was really looking for. But nonetheless, it's interesting to see. I really wish Jensen Button the best of luck. I wish he wasn't going to retire at this point, which he's not retiring. He's just taking a little bit of a step backwards in his career at this point. Interesting to see that he'll be leaving Joe Sport at the end of this year and scaling back on his career at the end of this season. Now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the IndyCar Iowa TV ratings from this past weekend. And honestly, they are not very good. As was reported by Adam Stern on Tuesday, the Fox earned 576,000 viewers for Saturday's race and 719,000 viewers on Sunday. Now to compare this to the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, which was running at Sonoma, the Xfinity race got 972,000 viewers, meaning that both races combined only got about 200 or 300,000 more than just one single NASCAR Xfinity Series race. Now look, the Iowa ratings are just not very good in general, but this has a lot of questions toward the future of Iowa Speedway because the attendance for this year was not very good and there was not a massive amount of promotion for this weekend in Iowa on the IndyCar side, and the pages didn't really do any sharing for it at this point. These numbers are not very good. It only has 576,000 on a Saturday. That isn't all around shocking and surprising. Saturday ratings aren't great, but IndyCar's just not been having good ratings so far outside of this year's Indianapolis 500. And the fact that the Xfinity Series has now surpassed IndyCar in popularity, that says a lot of indicative on where IndyCar is at this point. I think they need to start working on promotion and other things right now because at this particular moment in point, they're not in the best position. They're putting themselves in a terrible position, and to see the ratings down for IndyCar once again is really disappointing. I think last year the race got like 800, 900,000 viewers for both of them, so really disappointing stuff. Just no promotion whatsoever, and some pretty disappointing things in regards to Iowa's TV ratings for IndyCar, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Dober Tire for this weekend. Now, it was reported by Bob Puchyr, someone asked the questions about what kind of tire and combos are they going to be using for this weekend at Dober. Well, according to Bob Puchyr, there is going to be a new tire that's going to be run this weekend at Dober, but according to him also, there has been no test for this tire. They did no testing whatsoever, any drivers. There were no Goodyear tire tests that took place. When I heard this, I was like, oh boy. I was just thinking, what are we doing, NASCAR? So we're bringing a tire that has never been tested right before. Why did we not even do any sort of testing to make sure this tire is up to spec? Why are we just relying sometimes on Goodyear? Because Goodyear can sometimes have things that go wrong. I think that when it comes to stuff like this, whether it's tires, whether it's a new car, whatever it is, there probably needs to be some sort of testing that takes place at the track just to make sure, one, you're not going to have any issues. You're going to have like a 2008 Brickyard 400 situation. Maybe you could have something like Bristol in 2024 where we have tire failures because it's like a concrete track. There is weather in the area this weekend, so we might have rain that washes all the rubber off from this weekend. And I just think that this is a really questionable move from NASCAR to not have some sort of testing. I think that that would have been the best way to not have an issue come up because I get that they don't want to spend a lot of money, it seems like. They're in a lawsuit right now with 2011 in front row, but I think that they should have done some sort of testing to make sure that this tire was not going to have fundamental issues and any fundamental problems. So I'm disappointed by this news, but I'm also not shocked and surprised because NASCAR at this point, because NASCAR doesn't sometimes know what they're doing. They sometimes make questionable decisions, and they sometimes make questionable calls, and I think this definitely is one of their questionable calls that I've made to not have any sort of testing for this kind of stuff. Am I surprised? No, because it's NASCAR, but at the same token, same time, they absolutely should have done some sort of testing for this car, and at least for this tire, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Katherine Lake. As it was announced on Tuesday morning that Katherine Lake has added a few more races to her NASCAR Cup Series schedule in 2025. It was announced she'll drive the number 78 for Live Fast Motorsports next weekend at the Brickyard 400, and there's also been a change to her schedule. She was supposed to originally run Richmond in August. It's now been changed to she'll run at Las Vegas in the round of 8 in the number 78 car. She is going to become only the second female driver to compete in the Indy 500 and the Brickyard 400 as well. Of course, the only other person to do that is Danica Patrick, who competed in many Indy 500s and competed in around 4 or 5 Brickyard 400s in her NASCAR career. Now, Katherine Lake, obviously, she's someone that's had a lot of controversy around her throughout the year so far. Some of it justified, some not justified. But Katherine Lake, in my opinion, is someone who is deserving to get this opportunity to run one of the biggest races of the year, and that, of course, being the Brickyard 400. I think she's got a good chance and opportunity to maybe score top 30. We saw how wild the race was last year. A lot of drivers fell out. A lot of guys ended up crashing out of the race. I think there's a chance and possibility we could see her contend for a potential top 30 in the Brickyard 400. And another thing, or adding in a race like Las Vegas. Now, she will not run Richmond again. She will run at Las Vegas at the end of the season. I think that's important that she gets experience at different types of tracks to see if she can perform very, very well. I hope she can have a lot of success because I want to see her do well. Because if she can do well, that'd be really, really huge for the sport in general. So we'll see how she ends up doing. I think she's got a good chance and opportunity to do a really solid and really, really good job for sure, hopefully. I think Live Fast, they've had some struggles at times here. There's no denying that, but at the same time, I think she's got a solid opportunity here, and I think she'll do a pretty dang good job, hopefully, with the Live Fast Motorsports Group this weekend but next week at the Brickyard. We'll see how she does, and we'll see if she can perform very, very well next weekend at Indianapolis. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Aric Almirola. As it was confirmed a couple days ago, Aric Almirola will drive the number 19 for Joe Gibbs Racing for 2 more races in 2025. As he noted in his tweet, he'll run the car this weekend at Dober, and then he'll run the car next weekend at Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the number 19 machine. These 2 races, I believe, were not on the original schedule for Aric Almirola, so we're going to get him for a couple extra races throughout the remainder of the year. Now, Aric Almirola does have quite a bit of success at Dover. Of course, he won his first career NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race back in 2010. He kind of said this certainly was his first win. We all go back to what happened in 2007 at Milwaukee when Denny Hamlin came in and substituted for him. But as historically is a very good track for Aric Almirola. He had some success in the NASCAR Cup Series here, and it's going to be the first time he's ran Xfinity, I believe, in a couple years as well. So I'm excited to see what Aric Almirola can do. And then going to Indianapolis next week, I think Aric is going to be one of the favorites to win because you go back to last year, Aric in that 20 car, he had a car that could have beat Riley Herbst in that event. He was so fast and so strong and had a great chance and opportunity to go out there and pick up that win. So I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to have a fast car for sure. The 19's been one of the stronger Joe Gibbs Racing cars this year, and Aric, of course, has picked up a win so far in 2025 when they race at Phoenix. So it was a controversial win against Alex Bowman. I think he's going to be one of the guys you'll have to keep your eyes out on for sure. I think he'll be one to beat. I think he's going to have to beat the Junior Motorsports cars, but I think at the end of the day, Aric Almirola will have a pretty fast and good car. I think we'll have a solid chance and a pretty good opportunity to go out there and contend for a victory in the NASCAR Xfinity Series next weekend at Indy and also this weekend at Dover as well. We'll see how we can do in the next couple of races. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Sonoma TV ratings from this past weekend. As was reported by Adam Stern on Tuesday evening, that TNT got a 1.09 rating and 2.189 million viewers for Sunday's NASCAR Cup race at Sonoma on TNT and True TV. That is down from 2.8 or 2.9 million in 2024, but we do need to remember that that race was on Fox and that was not on a cable network like FS1. That, of course, on a main TV broadcast. This number for cable is actually decent, and what's really interesting is that this race actually got a better TV rating than the Chicago Street Course, which is kind of wild to think about at this point. Now, I think that for a cable race, have over 2 million people, that honestly is not that bad. I know that we've had a lot of issues with ratings this year. We've seen some races down like the Chicago Street Course only having like a little over 2 million people tune in. That was really bad, but for a race like Sonoma, for example, that generally doesn't get the best ratings. I mean, look at the Fox ratings. So last year, for example, 2.9 million for a road course race isn't as good. Road course races generally don't generate as many ratings. Same thing with short tracks as well as like the big intermediate tracks like Texas, for example, and Kansas. But I think at the same token, at the same time, I think this is not a terrible rating. Plus, we've been seeing Shima and Gisbergen win a lot of races. And I know people are going to hate me saying this, but there's probably going to be some people that are tired of seeing Shima and Gisbergen win every race. So I love seeing him win, don't get me wrong. I just think some people are probably tired of seeing him win a lot of these races at this point. Nonetheless, I think the ratings for this weekend are solid or not spectacular by any stretch of the imagination. But I think 2.81 is not that bad. I think there's a chance those ratings can go up. We're going to be having the Brickyard next week. We got Dover this weekend. weekend, though, with weather being a factor, there's a chance possibly that could kind of change at this moment. So we'll see what happens with this weekend's ratings for Dober. I'm not sure if they're going to be good. We'll just have to wait and see. Hopefully they are good, but I'm not sure if they are going to be good TV ratings for this weekend at Dober, in my honest opinion. I don't think they're going to be fantastic and great. Hopefully they can be, but we haven't seen great ratings for Dober in quite some time. Maybe we can. Who knows at this point, but nonetheless, we got the ratings out for Sonoma from this past weekend. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR 25. Now, a couple days ago, Matt Lewis did an interview with Mike Straw from Insider Gaming, who's been in the inside side of things, kind of talked about a lot of things going on motorsports games, among other things behind the scenes. And NASCAR 25, there's been a lot of talk around this game because we expect the game to be released sometime in the next couple of months, sometime in September or potentially early October as well. Now, there's been a lot of things that have been confirmed in regards to NASCAR 25. A lot of things we kind of knew at this point with NASCAR 25. That was pretty much a well-known thing. But let's begin by talking about career mode. So career mode, you cannot jump around to different series. You'll be starting your career basically in ARCA from the get-go. You can't just jump up to Xfinity. You can't just jump to Cup and jump to Trucks. You got to work your way up, kind of very similar how Dirt to Daytona works. You got to work your way up, which Dale Jr. did say the career mode was going to feel kind of similar to Dirt to Daytona. He basically confirmed that that's how it was going to be. A lot of people were upset about that. I can't really understand why. You can't just normally go into a career and basically jump straight into a top-level series in normal. I get people want to do that and have the opportunity to do that, but I think that it needs to be as realistic as possible with the career mode, and I do really like that. One thing that has been disappointing here, though, is there will be no split screen for this game, unfortunately. Now, they did say that that is going to be a priority going forward, and I got to agree with a lot of fans kind of disappointed about this. I think split screen needs to be a very important thing when it comes to racing games. I think split screen is important for any genre game, and not just for racing games. And we've been seeing this a lot more consistently with a lot of games. A lot of games are starting to not have as much split screen currently at the moment, and I think split screen, especially for racing in general, you need to have that in the game. So I'm disappointed to hear that is not going to be part of NASCAR 25. Now, they also said something that I'm actually interested in. They are actually using NASCAR Insights to really help when it comes to the type of driving attributes. Let's say, like, we drivers are good at certain tracks, like Kyle Larson being really good at Homestead, running the High Line at that track. Shaman Gisbergen being fantastic at road courses like he's been so far this year. Guys like the Penske cars being really good at super speedways. And maybe even like Phoenix as well. Maybe the Joe Gibbs cars also being good there as well. Like Richmond, for example, Joe Gibbs Racing being historically amazing at Richmond. I think that's something that I really love about that is they're using NASCAR Insights to help them a lot when it comes to this game. And finally, one thing that was also confirmed in regards to the career mode is there also will be no silly season in the game. They do plan to have some sort of silly season added to the game into the not-so-distant future, but as of right now, they will not be part of NASCAR 25. I've got no issues with that personally. I know there's been a lot of people that have been talking about this saying, oh, there needs to be a lot of silly season, but you gotta remember there's licensing that you have to go through, and a lot of these teams would probably be upset if their licensing got messed up. I mean, go back to the old games, right? Like NASCAR Thunder 2004 did not really have an intricate silly season in any way, shape, or form. So I really personally don't get and understand why people are upset about the fact that they're not adding certain things. I get that they want to add a lot of really cool things to the game, but at the same token, same time, I think no silly season is not the end of the world. I don't think it's something that should be an ender and game changer at this point. That's just what we know, though, about the game, and we'll get more information about the game very soon in regards to NASCAR 25. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about penalties. Now, it was reported by Bob Pockrass and Jeff Gluck as well. There will be no penalties coming from this weekend's race at Sonoma in regards to what happened outside of the racetrack at Sonoma. Now, there were a couple pit crew members that were basically penalized for tire issues, like the people that are part of the 51 team, of course, for the tire coming off. But there were some questions whether there were going to be any penalties that took place after what happened on pit road. Whether Ty Gibbs is going to receive some sort of penalty, or Brad Keselowski was going to receive some sort of penalty, or the pit crew members on the team part of the scuffle were going to receive any sort of penalties for what happened on pit road. I am glad to see, though, that NASCAR is not penalizing any of the pit crews for the scuffle on pit road. I think if you're that close to pit road, right, and you get hit by a car, I think you have a right to be a little bit frustrated with the team. Now, granted, none of those team pit crew members are really at fault for what happened over there at RFK at Joe Gibbs Racing, but at the same time, I get why that pit crew member was really, really frustrated, because I've seen people like Kevin Harvick defending what Ty Gibbs did, and Ty Gibbs entered in a much shallower position in pit road than he had done in the previous moments. So I really don't get why people are defending Ty Gibbs fully. Plus, I get that people are, well, I also think that Ty Gibbs didn't fully 1,000% do anything wrong. But at the same time, I think Ty Gibbs has to learn, like, you can't just go so close and almost hit people at this point. Plus, Ty Gibbs, unfortunately, does have quite a bit of history of getting really close to pit road and causing incidents on pit road as well. So I just don't know what you could have done in that situation. And the drivers shouldn't be penalized or something like this, but I also think it's good that NASCAR isn't penalizing the pit crew members involved in the scuffle on pit road. I think that would have been a terrible decision on NASCAR's part if there had been any way, shape, or form that they got any sort of penalty, because if they got a penalty for what happened, this would have been a really, really stupid move on NASCAR's part. So I'm glad NASCAR is basically saying, we're not going to send any penalties to the teams that were involved in the scuffle. It would have been nonsensical for that to happen at this point, and I'm glad to see NASCAR just sits here as like, yep, there's no reason to penalize anybody for it. But I think when it comes to pit road, things like that there needs to be less danger on pit road. You can't have stuff like that happen where there's a lot of danger happening on the track, because you have contact, and if there's any sort of payback, which it sounds like there was no malicious intent, according to what Ty Gibbs said, he was trying to get the best entry to pit road, which I completely understand, trying to get the best entry to pit road at this point. But at the same time, I think Ty Gibbs has to be careful, because he has a little bit of history. He's been penalized multiple times. For instance, on pit road, just go back to Texas in 2022 with Ty Dillon. He got into Ty Dillon then, and he got a penalty for it. So I really am glad to see NASCAR not coming in and basically penalizing anybody for the scuffle on pit road, and I think they should have at least reviewed it. It looks like they did review it a little bit, which is nice to see. They should have reviewed it, and I'm glad to see that they reviewed that situation on pit road, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Brendan Butterby Queen. Now, we did a video covering the story on the channel a couple days ago, but it was announced on Tuesday morning that Brendan Butterby Queen will make his NASCAR season debut next weekend at Indianapolis Raceway Park, as he'll drive the 07 truck for Spire Motorsports. Now, one thing I do want to correct from the video that I did a couple days ago is that he's made a couple starts in the Craftsman Truck Series of 4 with Tricon Garage, where he drove and got a top 5 in North Wilkesboro. I believe scored a top 15 or top 20 at Kansas later in that season. But this is going to be the first time he's driven a Chevrolet in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Now, I am very, very high on Brendan Butterby Queen. I think that young man has a lot of potential, and he has a ton of talent. He is someone that's done really good so far at ARCA this year. He has scored 3 wins so far, that course being at Daytona International Speedway. He picked up the win at Kansas and also picked up another win earlier in the season as well. And he probably should have won more races in ARCA, considering he kind of got screwed out of that win and robbed out of that win at Phoenix, where he obviously had maybe one of the fastest cars in the field and dominated the second half of the event. No disrespect to Brent Cruz. Brent Cruz is really talented, but Brendan absolutely should have been given the win there, and the fact he didn't win was really, really disappointing. But I think for Brendan, he is going to have a really great chance and opportunity here to compete for a solid finish. But the 07 truck, I'll admit it, they're not one of the fastest teams overall out there when it comes to Spire. They are the weakest of the 4 teams. I mean, when Kyle Busch cannot take that car to contend for the win, that says a lot. Kyle Busch is running 10th to 15th in that truck, and the only person really who's contended for a win in that truck this year is Kyle Larson. And Kyle Larson finished second in the race. He got second in a race. And then, of course, he won with the 07 truck in Homestead. But you also do have to remember as well, the 07 truck was not the fastest truck in that Homestead race. Corey Heim had the fastest truck. Unfortunately for Corey, he had some sort of mechanical gremlins and issues that really, unfortunately, affected him having a chance and opportunity to go out there and compete. I really do think that we are going to see Brendan, though, do pretty well. He's a good short track racer. We've seen other guys go to victory lane with the Spire Motorsports equipment so far this year. You think about drivers, of course, like Kyle Larson, like I mentioned. Carson Hosbar's gotten a win. Kyle Busch has picked up the win. Roger Kroof has gotten a win so far this year. I do think Brendan could have a chance to join that elite class of drivers who have scored victories in 2025. I think that is certainly possible, but it's going to be really depending on how good that car is. And like I've already mentioned and said before, I just don't trust that Spire Motorsports car at the moment right now. I think the truck has been a little inconsistent. A lot of guys who've gone behind the wheel of that truck just haven't had the same consistent pace and speed. And I'm just not really sure at the moment how that truck is going to do, because I don't trust the Spire team right now, that 07 truck. We're going to talk about a story here later that does involve the organization and team in later today, but I will say, though, that I think they're spread too thin in some areas with Spire Motorsports team, but at the same token, at the same time, it's a good opportunity for Brennan. I think he's earned the right and chance. I would love to see him full-time in trucks next year, maybe with Spire. Who knows, maybe he becomes teammates with Roger Cruz. I think that'd be a really exciting story. We'll see what happens down the road, and we'll see if Brennan Butterby Queen maybe down the road gets that chance and opportunity to maybe join up with that team in organization in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2025 and 26. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chris Wright. As we did a video covering the story also on the channel a couple days ago, but has been officially announced and confirmed on Tuesday that Chris Wright has officially been fired and has parted ways with Our Motorsports effective immediately. Kaz Grala is going to be the driver of the number 5 for Our Motorsports this weekend at Dober. And after this weekend, there's some rumors about the team's uncertain future, something the organization may shut down because of them losing a lot of funding and a lot of sponsorship, with Chris Wright's team no longer being over there. Chris Wright also did release his own statement saying thanking the team for a lot of the support and working with them throughout the year, and thanking for the opportunities to kind of improve as a race car driver throughout the season. This is something that I've been kind of thinking, we've been talking about, right? Chris Wright throughout the year. And Chris Wright, I did a lot of statistical thinking. Last year in this car, Anthony Alfredo, at this track nonetheless, was able to win a Dash for Cash event. And he ran in the top 15, the top 16 in points pretty much all year and all season long. You compare that to Chris Wright. Chris Wright has only had 3 top 20 finishes all season long and 1 top 10. And that top 10 came at Martinsville, where he finished in 9th place. Keep this in mind, that was the same race where everyone wrecked each other, and really you couldn't tell who were the fastest cars. Taylor Gray was up there a lot of the race. He got turned at one point. Connor Zilch dominated the first half of the race. He got involved in a bunch of carnage and stupidity on the racetrack, majority of it really not being his fault for all the carnage that happened on the racetrack. So that race really didn't indicate how good of a driver Chris Wright is. He has been atrocious in that car, and everything he has gotten behind the wheel, he has not been very, very good. I mean, last year in ARCA, yes, he finished second in the standings, hang the banner, but he just hasn't really done much in NASCAR competition. I think the best option for Chris Wright at this point is to go back down and race in a lower series, because he was last in full-time points. He was 28th or 29th in the regular season standings, and I think the guy who's driving this weekend, that being Kaz Grala, is going to contend for top 10 or top 15. That Our Motorsports equipment is not as bad as Chris Wright has made it this year. That car ran a lot better Anthony Alfredo. It ran a lot better Brett Moffitt. Jeb Burton drove for that team a couple years ago. He contended for a playoff spot at one point and did have a chance to get some stuff done over at that organization. I just think when you look at this team and organization, I think they took a lot of the money, and I think they also got tired and frustrated with all the equipment getting destroyed. Let's talk about this. Chris Wright destroyed a lot of equipment over at the Our Motorsports team. He took a lot of cars from that team out of contention for really, really good runs. He wrecked Justin Allgaier because he couldn't hold his damn line at Texas Motor Speedway, driving all over the track, 20, 25 miles an hour off the pace. Kyle Larson almost got involved in a wreck with this same driver as well, and he was pretty much a nuisance all day long during that event. And then you think about the stuff with Josh Walicki. He wrecked Josh Walicki. Not once, not twice, but 3 times, and took no accountability and no responsibility for the incident that happened on the track there. I just think when you look at the situation that happened with Chris Wright, I think it's absolutely justified that he lost a seat over here. And I hate saying that about drivers because I don't like seeing drivers lose their seats and lose their opportunities to race. But when you are getting outperformed by people in worse equipment in NASCAR competition, when you're getting outperformed by guys like Matt DiBenedetto who are driving for lesser equipment like Viking Motorsports, for example, when Kyle Sieg's ahead of you in the points, I like Kyle Sieg a lot, but Kyle Sieg is not the best driver out there, let's be real and honest. I just think at this particular moment in point, I think it is very questionable why he got the seat in the first place. I think that Brett Moffitt probably should have gotten a seat, or I don't know, Kyle Weatherman should have gotten the seat, considering Kyle Weatherman doesn't have a seat at this moment. He should have been absolutely racing in NASCAR this year. It should have been Weatherman over right behind the wheel of that car. So I think Kyle Weatherman would have done a lot better job behind the wheel of this car than he has done. I just don't rate Chris Wright. I don't think he's that good. I think he absolutely did not deserve the chance and opportunity to race in NASCAR this season, and it was super questionable in the first place why he got the chance and opportunity to race, because his numbers in ARCA were not too impressive. Yes, he almost got a couple wins, but at the same token, same time, the field in ARCA is not that strong right now. So it's a questionable move if you ask me why he got the chance and opportunity. We'll see what Chris's future is at this point, and we'll see what the future of Our Motorsports is right now. But I think there's some unknowns what's going to happen with the Our Motorsports team. We'll see what happens, and we'll see where he goes from here. And I think there's still some uncertainty what's going to happen at Our Motorsports as well. But I'm glad to see he's been fired because he did not deserve the chance and opportunity to race in NASCAR competition this year, in my honest opinion. Now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Chicagoland Speedway. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Wednesday evening, the NASCAR has been evaluating a possible return to Chicagoland in 2026. While nothing's been officially confirmed, they say chances are increasing according to industry insiders. This could have potential effect also on the Mexico City date and the Chicago Street Course date as well. Now let's talk about this for a second. It is my understanding that they want to stay in the Chicago market for the 2026 season. And currently right now at the moment, they are in the final year of the deal with the Chicago Street Course. And while they have opened the possibility of return to Chicago Street Course in the 2026 season, many do not believe that they will be returning more than likely next year and may just leave on a high note. The reason being is because if they bring back the Chicago Street Course in the 2026 season, many do believe that it would be a little earlier in the year or later in the year. And you have to have a certain amount of time in a certain part of window in order to have this race. And the 4th of July weekend, while yes, they've been affected by weather, you have to have it a certain amount of time in a certain date, basically, when it comes to the weather issue. So that could be a major issue. They could play some concessions to keep it around on the schedule, but they don't expect to be on the schedule more than likely next year at this time. Meanwhile, like I've mentioned, we're going to talk about San Diego here later this afternoon, but they basically want to stay in the Chicago market for 2026. Chicagoland Speedway fits that market, and there's been a lot of increased chatter around this track returning over the last year or so. Like I mentioned a second ago, if we do have a race at Chicagoland in 2026, it'll be the first time since 2019. They were originally on the schedule for 2020, but because of the pandemic that took place back 5 years ago, which 2020 was a weird year, by the way, they basically were not able to be added to the schedule for the year because of Illinois' restrictions, among other things, at the time. And they haven't been on the schedule since. That day for Chicagoland, I believe, went to another track for the 2022 season and 2020 season at that point. Now, obviously, Chicagoland Speedway, they've been working on the racetrack. There was a video that Carson Osbar did. The track has been updated in recent weeks, and obviously the grass has been mowed, and they've been having a lot of people coming in and out working on the track to get it up to speed. Now, they have said publicly that if they do get the race in 2026, it's probably going to take a couple weeks, probably about 4 or 5 months, they're thinking, to get the track up to speed to make sure the track is ready to go. But they are working on the track currently at the moment as we speak. Now, my big question is, let's say Chicagoland does come on the schedule. What part of the year would it be? Could it be the 4th of July weekend? I think that is certainly a possibility. They could have Chicago be the market where the 4th of July race is taking place. It could be during that said weekend. It could be a night race. Who knows at this point? They do have lights at the track that do properly work. I think Chicagoland, though, when you think about it, even Dale Jr. quoted this as well and quote tweeted this, I think that Chicagoland Speedway would absolutely put on a fantastic show and put on a fantastic product. We have seen how the next-gen car has raced at tracks like Kansas, the sister track of Chicagoland, and the racing in Kansas with the next-gen car has been absolutely phenomenal. I think about tracks like Las Vegas, for example, like Charlotte, for example. Those kind of tracks have put on amazing and fantastic products. Michigan, well, yes, it's at 1.5 miles, it's a 2-mile track. Michigan's put on some really good shows with an next-gen car. I think that Chicagoland especially would be great. You think about some of the races, even like the 550 race in 2019. That was still one of the best races of 2019. It really didn't even affect the package because the racing that year was just really good at that racetrack. So Chicagoland, in my opinion, well, yes, you're probably going to have to do some patchwork to the turds because I think there's some things that do need to be worked on with that part of the track. I don't think you need to have a full repave. Now, down the road, there probably is going to have to be some sort of repave for the racetrack because they've had the original surface, I believe, since 2001, and they haven't repaved it in nearly a quarter of a century. And by the time you're starting to have things that kind of start breaking apart at that point, and sometimes you have to have resurfacing. If they do down the road do some sort of resurfacing of the track and repaving of the track, I really hope they bring some sort of surface into the track where they can basically have the track age like it did and can put on some really good racing. Maybe similar compound to what they had at Atlanta, Atlanta, where the track just ages really, really quickly, and you don't have the same like top like black soil than black roads we've seen. It could be like starting to age, and you see the concrete aging and the pavement aging as well. But to me, this makes me really excited. I have been clamoring for a return to Chicagoland all the way back in 2021 to 2022, and I've been disappointed for many years that this track has not been on the schedule, but obviously they didn't want to have two races in the same market. Now, there is, again, a possible chance that they could have two races in the same market next year, but I don't expect that. If Chicagoland comes in, I don't think Chicago Street Course will be on the schedule. Now, the other track that could be affected with this is Mexico City, because we are hearing that San Diego may be hosting a date in the 2026 year, but it doesn't sound like that San Diego is going to be replacing the Chicago Street Course weekend. Instead, it sounds like that Mexico City may be off the schedule in 2026. There is a lot of increased chatter currently at the moment that the Mexico City NASCAR Cup Series race and Xfinity Series races will not be taking place once again in 2026. Reasons being is because of the World Cup. Also, IndyCar is really pushing for a date in 2026 as well, and it's very likely they are going to get a date next year for the first time in almost 2 decades. I think what's so exciting, though, is the fact that Chicagoland is more than likely coming back next year. That's what's really exciting to me, because Chicagoland is a fantastic racetrack for racing. The racing is always very, very good, and it's generally very, very solid to watch. So we'll see what happens in regards to Chicagoland, but like I said, I think the chances are increasing, and I think it's very, very likely that Chicago will be back on the schedule in 2026, and to be honest, I think that's really exciting, and I think that's great to see that the track will most likely be back for the 2026 NASCAR Cup, Xfinity, and probably also Truck Series will be there as well, considering they've done triple headers for many years. You'll probably see all 3 series there in 2026 as well. And now we're going to head on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Legacy Motor Club. Now, I did a video covering the story on the channel a couple days back on Wednesday, but it was announced and reported by Bob Pockrass originally that Legacy Motor Club has filed a lawsuit against TJ Puchyr. And according to what's been reported, they are filing the lawsuit against TJ Puchyr because apparently he brokered the Legacy Motor Club / Rick Ware Racing deal. Let's go to a little bit of a backstory on this lawsuit. So this lawsuit began on April 1st, April Fool's Day of this year. Legacy had an agreement originally to sign a contract where they would have 3 charters for the 2026 season, and they entered a purchase agreement, and TJ Puchyr had been involved in that, apparently according to them. They were supposed to have this deal announced a couple weeks later, and then of course that deal fell through, and Legacy felt like that Rick Ware kind of cheated them out, because Rick Ware thought that they had signed a deal for 2027 instead of 2026. Well, Legacy Motor Club came back and said, no, you basically have sold it for 2026 and you're wanting a change to 2027. And then continuing on with this whole situation, it would continue on. There would be a hearing. They asked for a preliminary injunction to Rick Ware Racing to not sell that charter. I think it was charter number 27, which is currently being leased to RFK Racing at this point, for Ryan Preece to drive the number 60 car in the 2026 and 25, and also likely the 2026 season, as the other charter is expected to transfer over to RFK Racing for next year. Then continuing on, they asked for a preliminary injunction to make sure that charter was not sold. And at the time, the judge basically denied that injunction to make sure that the TRO, he denied the temporary restraining order for that charter to be effectively sold. Continuing on with this lawsuit, there was more information that came out. There was a hearing that took place, and there's a lot of information that did come out earlier this week. Apparently, Rick Ware Racing basically told the courts that they were not going to sell the charter to anybody. They were not allowed to sell those charters at that point. Well, we've come to find out that TJ Puchyr was going to be purchasing Rick Ware Racing and purchasing all 2 charters from the team and looking to be a 3-car team by the 2027 season. So they basically are backing off of what the judge said. The judge said if you try to sell this charter and try to get out of this deal, this could be major trouble for you. We could be talking about potential legal trouble for the Rick Ware Racing team. Then they have basically tried to sell it to TJ Puchyr to become a 2-car team next year. So they're backing out of it, and they're basically trying to skirt the lines of basically saying, yeah, we're going to try to find a way to get out of this lawsuit by sending TJ Puchyr to be the guy who's running the organization and team. I think that's one of the big reasons why TJ Puchyr came on as the first place to be the new team owner of the organization, because why would you keep Cody Ware on your organization and keep Rick Ware with your team? Unless you're coming in to try to skirt the lawsuit at this point. If this is true and all this stuff is accurate, which I think it is accurate if you're saying it in court, then this is going to be major trouble for Rick Ware Racing, and they may lose this case, and Legacy Motor Club may in fact become a 3-car team at that point. Let's say Rick Ware Racing and whatever the name TJ Puchyr is going to be, let's say they do win the lawsuit overall. Well, they would be able to get their 2 charters for 2026 and also be able to have an opportunity to expand to a 3-car team in 2027. The question would be, would Rick Ware continue being on as the leader of the team, or would Cody Ware continue driving for the organization, Rick Ware be part of the organization, or would they change things up and let's say bring someone like a Corey LaJoie or Harrison Burton or Sam Mayer, Charlotte Creed into the organization? I think that's actually certainly a potential possibility for the 2026 year. 27 year. But let's say Legacy Motor Club does in fact win the lawsuit. Well, one, they'll get to have 3 charters for the 2026 season. My guess is they may go after someone like a Daniel Suarez. If Suarez doesn't go to Junior Motorsports, that could certainly be a possibility for next year. They could also get Jesse Love. Jimmy Johnson is very high on Jesse Love, and we've heard his name mentioned not once but twice in recent weeks about being a potential candidate to join up with that organization. So I certainly think that's also a major possibility for the 2026 year as well. In general, though, I think what's so interesting about this lawsuit is, unlike the 2011 and front row lawsuit, where we hear a lot of different things and hear information, this lawsuit, I feel like, has a resolution coming not so far down the road, and the judge will probably make a decision in the coming weeks and coming months on what's going to happen, whether Legacy will, in fact, be able to get that 3rd charter, which could affect RFK Racing down the road, because they do have a charter agreement that they signed for 2026, a lease agreement that they have signed for next year, where they are supposed to, in 2026, they're supposed to have 3 cars for the next year. We know that Brad's going to be back in the 6th car. We know that Ryan Preece is going to be in 16, and we know that Chris Buescher is going to be in the 17. What happens there if they don't get to have that 3rd charter lease? Do they go into a lawsuit with Legacy? I don't know at this point. Does that lease agreement get thrown out the window? They lose a ton of money? Who knows at this point? Is Brad Keselowski retired? Who knows? But at the same time, I think that this lawsuit has a lot of interesting effects to it, because it could affect both organizations in a major and massive way. I think Legacy, at this moment, when I look at this lawsuit compared to the other lawsuit, I think Legacy Motor Club is looking like they're in the best chance and the best potential outcome for them to be in a great position for the 2026 year. So we'll see what happens with this lawsuit going forward, and we'll see who ends up winning the outcome of the suit. But to me, I'm leaning toward right now the winner of the suit being Legacy Motor Club. It just looks like they're in the catbird seat right now. I don't know if Rick Ware will win unless they present evidence, and TJ Puchyr can present evidence, but at the same time, it doesn't look good for TJ Puchyr and that team, in my honest opinion. So that is going to be today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. List description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about Legacy Motor Club suing TJ Puchyr? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Chicagoland Speedway likely returning to the schedule next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, we'll have another NASCAR news video dropping in a couple hours from now. Then, of course, tomorrow, and we'll probably have the reaction to the ARCA race as well. Then, of course, on Saturday, we're going to have the Xfinity Series reactions to the race and Cup qualifying as well. And then, of course, on Sunday, we'll have the starting lineup video and the Cup race review from Dober, unless, of course, we do have weather become a factor, which weather sounds like it could be a factor for this weekend at Dober. We might get the race postponed to Monday. If that's the case, we'll just have the postponement video dropping, and then Monday we'll have a NASCAR news video probably then on Tuesday and stuff like that. We got content coming on people like Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Carl Arts, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Ryan Preece, like I said, Ross Chastain, Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Clayton Zafaron, Dodge Ram, Frankie Muniz, Red Bull, other stuff like Clayton Zafaron, Tony Breidinger, you name it. We'll talk about all that kind of stuff on the channel in the coming days and weeks. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, buddy.